The latest folk horror film Devil Dog arrives with a chilling tale. The film is adapted from Vietnamese folklore. Upon its release, it quickly topped Southeast Asia's horror movie charts and set a box office record of 10 billion dong. Friendly reminder: this film is high intensity throughout. Tag your most unfortunate friends to watch it together. The story begins with Butcher Pakun riding a motorcycle, carrying a recently slaughtered dog, ready to deliver it to a customer for a drinking party. But as he reached a secluded stretch of road, the motorcycle suddenly stalled. Pakun got off to check, but after inspecting it, he found nothing wrong with the bike. Pakun thought nothing of it and went to the roadside pond to wash his hands. At that moment, the dead dog tied to the back seat of the motorcycle suddenly came back to life. Its eyes glowed blood red, and a menacing growl came from its throat. When Pakun turned to look, everything returned to normal. He assumed it was just the wind, but the next second, Pakun fell headfirst into the pond. Terrified, he flailed his arms, trying to get up, but it felt as if something was holding him down, unable to move at all. Moments later, he drowned in the pond. The villagers were baffled by Pakun's death. A normal person couldn't drown themselves, so they speculated that Pakun must have encountered something unclean while walking alone at night after his death. His eyes turned a ghostly green, giving him a terrifying appearance. His wife, Macy, was too scared to approach the body, so she asked her son, Anan, to close his father's eyes. But suddenly, Pakun's eyes opened wide, startling everyone into a frenzy of screams. What was even more horrifying was that black blood oozed from Pakun's orifices, flowing toward the bite-like wound on his neck. Anan found it strange, but didn't think much of it. His girlfriend, Xiaoxuan, was pregnant, so he feared the funeral might bring bad luck to the baby, and quickly brought Xiaoxuan into the house. But as soon as Xiaoxuan entered Anan's house, she felt a headache and a strange numbness. She turned her head suddenly, only to see Pakun's dead body following her. Xiaoxuan thought her eyes were playing tricks on her, so she said nothing, but Anan's dog hid under the table in fear. That night, Anan was keeping vigil alone for his father. When he suddenly heard noises from beneath the coffin, he bent down to look and saw his father, dressed in animal skins, standing barefoot beside the coffin. Anan jumped up in terror and ran to check the other side of the coffin, but found nothing. Anan's hair stood on end. At that moment, he heard a sound behind him. Turning around, he saw his family hanging from the courtyard trees, all purple-faced and strangled. Anan was petrified, instinctively backing away, only to feel someone standing behind him.
Nó muốn giết cả nhà mình.
Anan woke up from the nightmare, realizing it was just a dream. He quickly checked under the coffin and confirmed there were no feet like in his dream, finally breathing a sigh of relief. But he didn't notice a black, ghostly handprint on his left shoulder, left by his father's ghost in the dream. It was his father's spirit sending him a warning. The next morning was the burial. Anan chose a prime feng shui spot for his father, but as the coffin was lowered, the soil on both sides of the pit began to move strangely. Back at home, Pakun's memorial portrait suddenly shook, but no one noticed. After the funeral, Anan's uncle eagerly took over Pakun's dog meat shop, resuming the business of slaughtering and selling dogs. Hearing that nursing female dogs were highly nutritious, he bought a lactating dog, tied its limbs, and hung it upside down. He began slaughtering it and draining its blood. After drinking a large cup of dog blood, the uncle felt instantly refreshed. Then he slaughtered the dog, and the aunt brought a large bowl of freshly cooked dog meat, offering it to Xiaoxuan. But Xiaoxuan, a vegetarian, was disgusted by the sight of the blackened meat and felt nauseated. Seeing this, the aunt's face darkened.
Thịt chó nó vừa ngon, vừa mát, nhiều đạm. Thế mà lại chê, không ăn. Thằng Nam nhà này.
Xiaoxuan was frightened by the aunt's glare, thankfully. Anan came over at that moment, and the aunt stopped pressuring her to eat the dog meat. Otherwise, Xiaoxuan would have left the house immediately. Afterward, Anan gathered the family and proposed marrying Xiaoxuan as soon as possible. The uncle immediately opposed the idea, saying it was inappropriate to marry during a mourning period. Anan quickly explained that the urgency was because Xiaoxuan was pregnant. Hearing this, the uncle's expression turned malicious.
Thả nó đi.
Chú nói gì chú? Chú nói gì mà nghe được hả chú?
Chú ơi, dù sao thì cũng con cháu trong nhà. Chắc gì cái thai này đã là máu mủ nhà mình.
Having just taken over the dog meat shop, he feared that once the child was born, Anan might compete with him for the business to earn money for baby formula, so he didn't want them to marry. The aunt and the uncle's wife supported him, criticizing Xiaoxuan for being unmarried and pregnant, and urging her to have an abortion. Seeing the family on the verge of conflict, Anan's mother, Macy, quickly intervened, suggesting they wait 49 days for the mourning period to pass before discussing the marriage. Xiaoxuan felt deeply wronged. She couldn't sleep that night and went outside, only to hear the sound of bones being chewed in the kitchen. Everyone else was already asleep. Xiaoxuan broke into a cold sweat, but gathered her courage and turned to look. She saw a terrifying creature, a humanoid figure with a dog's head, sitting at the dining table, eating sacrificial offerings. On the ground, another creature, with a dog's body and a human head, was licking dog food. Even more horrifying, on the kitchen counter lay the severed lower half of a human body. Xiaoxuan was so shocked she froze in place. She quickly covered her mouth and slowly backed away. Only when Anan and Macy arrived did Xiaoxuan feel a sense of safety. But when she looked at the table again, the two monsters had vanished, and the severed torso on the counter was also gone. Xiaoxuan was so terrified she could barely speak. Macy quickly told Anan to take Xiaoxuan back to her room to rest. Macy explained that after a recent death in the family, those who are physically weak are more likely to hear or see the spirits of the deceased. Macy believed it was her husband's ghost, still lingering in the house, so she placed offerings near Pakun's shrine and turned on a recorder to play Buddhist scriptures, hoping to guide her husband's spirit to rest. But suddenly, Pakun's memorial portrait shook violently. Frightened, Macy rushed to turn off the recorder, and the shaking stopped. The next moment, footsteps echoed from the roof. Each step crushed a piece of tile. Macy looked up in shock and saw a pair of blood-red eyes glaring at her fiercely from the rooftop. Terrified, Macy fainted. Anan noticed something shocking. His mother's ankles bore 2 large bite marks, identical to the wounds on his father's neck. Not knowing what else to do, Anan called a doctor to treat his mother's injuries, with Pakun newly deceased. Strange events began happening in the house. The uncle suspected that Pakun hadn't been buried properly, so he took his wife and sister to consult a shaman. The shaman asked for Pakun's date of death, then lit incense and began a divination ritual.
Tháng canh thân, ngày canh thân. Ông ấy đã trích nhầm ngày hắc đạo thiên lao, vốn dĩ là một ngày rất xấu. Vậy mà ai đó trong gia đình lại cẩu thả an táng vào đúng giờ ngọ ngày nhâm tuất là chí âm, nên nó tạo ra việc xấu. Thậm chí
The dead cannot rest in peace, and their ghosts will return home to wreak havoc. So the uncle asked the shaman to trap Pakun's spirit in a soul-binding urn and release it only after the 49-day mourning period, allowing him to reincarnate directly and no longer haunt the family. The shaman lit 3 sticks of incense, chanted a summoning scripture, and called Pakun's spirit out of the grave, sealing it into the soul urn. The uncle believed this would restore peace to the family. But when Anan went out to the market, he encountered another strange event. Passing by a dog meat shop, he saw customers eating dog meat with gusto, but a young boy suddenly ran into the shop, looking terrified. The boy began trembling uncontrollably. Anan quickly went over to ask Lai Ji about it. Lai Ji glanced at Anan meaningfully and reminded him that the red-nosed dog was one his family had raised as a guard dog. Anan found Lai Ji's words confusing, but Lai Ji explained that their family had once run a dog meat shop as well. killing thousands of dogs every year. But one night, her father seemed possessed by a dog's spirit and suddenly bit all the family members to death. Lai Ji and her younger brother hid under the bed in terror. But her father dragged them out and attacked them viciously. Her brother was severely bitten, and although he survived by sheer luck, he became mentally unstable. He would only eat and sleep in dog cages, constantly seeing the ghosts of dead dogs pouncing on him. Lai Ji explained that this was Yeli at work. According to legend, anyone who runs a dog meat shop or eats a lot of dog meat will be haunted by the spirits of dead dogs, bringing them misfortune until they die. This curse, known as Yeli, had now evidently fallen upon Anan's family. Lai Ji's story left Anan deeply shaken, and when he returned home, he immediately researched it online. He discovered that in folklore, white dogs with red noses are vessels for evil spirits. Evil spirits reincarnate into red-nosed dogs, transferring their grudges from their past lives, turning the dogs into fearsome devil dogs. Seeking vengeance against their enemies, Anan was filled with unease. At that moment, his aunt let out a terrified scream. Anan rushed to her room, only to see the family's red-nosed dog standing upright like a human. Staring through the window, Anan was dumbfounded and immediately ran outside to chase it. Before he realized it, he had entered a dense forest. Anan was horrified to see a long dead fruit tree covered with dog skins, their glowing red eyes blinking ominously. Even more terrifying, the family's red-nosed dog emerged from behind the ancient tree, wearing a conical hat and stirring a pot with a stick. Like a human, Anan fled back home in terror and told his family what he had seen. He urged his uncle to close the dog meat shop and stop killing dogs, but no one believed him. The uncle, visibly annoyed, refused and even vowed to expand the business, saying the dog meat shop was too profitable to close. Stray dogs could be bought for 20 yuan and sold for 400 to 500 yuan after being cooked. The high profit made it foolish to give up the business. Anan turned to his aunt for help, hoping she would persuade the uncle, but the aunt, tempted by the huge profits, lied and said she hadn't seen anything.
Ngày mai vẫn mở. Tội vạ đâu. Tao chịu.
With such arrogance from his aunt, Anan didn't know what else to say. The next day, the dog meat shop operated as usual. The aunt slaughtered a dog herself, butchered it into 8 pieces, and as a woman came to buy dog meat, the aunt grabbed a dog leg and chopped it forcefully. Hearing the sound of chopping meat outside, Anan realized that every time his aunt chopped, his mother would let out a piercing scream, so he quickly ran to the butcher table, urging his aunt to stop chopping. Seeing a customer nearby, the aunt put down the cleaver, but as soon as the customer left, she angrily yelled at Anan. The aunt didn't believe in the devil dog legend. She thought the strange incidents in the family were because Pakun's burial date was unlucky. Now that the shaman had trapped Pakun's spirit, she felt there was nothing to fear. But that night, as she was closing the shop, the aunt heard the sound of meat being chopped behind her. Turning around, she saw the cleaver untouched on the cutting board. She got up to investigate, and at that moment, she stumbled onto a metal barrel. Her palm was instantly slashed. She was in pain and terrified, but couldn't get up. Then suddenly, her throat was slit by the edge of the metal barrel, killing her instantly. This plunged the family back into darkness, but the uncle and his wife dismissed it, believing it was just an accident, so they continued capturing and slaughtering dogs as usual on the 7th night after the aunt's death. As the uncle's wife passed by the dog cage, she heard the sound of it opening. She turned around, only to be terrified out of her wits. The dogs in the cage had turned into red-faced children and were crawling out.
Làm gì có thằng nào? Làm gì có thằng nào?
What she had seen moments ago were humans, but now lying lifeless on the ground were dogs. Thinking of the devil dog legend, the uncle's wife was too scared to sleep. She got up in the middle of the night and heard the sound of chewing meat behind her. Turning around, she saw the dog they had killed earlier that day, gnawing on her husband's leg. In the blink of an eye, the dog vanished. Then a noise came from under the bed. She crouched to look and saw the devil dog crouched beneath.
Lại của tao nào à?
The uncle realized too late his leg had rotted severely. He could no longer lift it. Writhing in pain, his cries woke Anan, and as Anan looked outside, he feared that their red-nosed dog had become possessed by an evil spirit, so he quickly ran out, but when he looked, their red-nosed dog was eating from its bowl, seemingly normal. Anan breathed a sigh of relief, but the next second, Anan was terrified and panicked, but the red-nosed dog had disappeared. However, Anan's arm was bitten. This convinced him once again that the devil dog was behind all the chaos, but the uncle still believed that something was wrong with Pakun's grave, so he went to the shaman again, hoping to have his brother's spirit completely destroyed. The shaman explained that doing so would harm the family's karmic fortune and bring misfortune to their bloodline and descendants. The uncle reluctantly gave up, but the shaman then suggested a spirit trapping ritual, which could bind the deceased soul permanently, trapping all 3 souls and 7 spirits in an urn. The effect would be similar to obliteration. Hearing this, the uncle immediately agreed, but he knew Anan and Macy would never allow it, so the uncle decided to carry out the ritual in secret to distract Anan. He spiked Xiaoxuan's soup with a miscarriage-inducing drug, causing Xiaoxuan to suddenly hemorrhage. Anan rushed her to the hospital, giving the uncle the opportunity to call the shaman to the graveyard. They dug up Pakun's corpse and gouged out its eyes, ensuring that Pakun's ghost would never find its way home again.
Cuối cùng là dùng cây đinh dài đóng xuyên thẳng vào đầu của cái xác người dính chặt vào quan tài, rồi để nhốt linh hồn của ông ta dưới đáy mộ. Việc này phải làm càng sớm càng tốt.
Meanwhile, the uncle's wife wasn't idle either. She poured a bowl of dog blood into Pakun's incense burner and placed a straw doll with Anan's name written on it beside it, hoping to curse Pakun's lineage to end with Anan. Fortunately, Anan returned just in time and discovered everything. He demanded to know why the aunt was so malicious, but the aunt replied that the real malice came not from her, but from Macy, who spent her days praying and chanting,
Ăn chay niệm Phật. Tại sao? Tại chị sợ quả báo. Tại chị đã giết người. Chị giết con tôi. Dù gì nó cũng là huyết thống giống cả. Bao nhiêu năm mày giam dưới cho chồng tao là anh chồng của mày. Tao không thể bỏ qua. Mày muốn hại cháu tao. Tao không thể bỏ qua.
Anan was utterly confused. His mother had always been meek and timid. Why was she suddenly being accused of such evil? What deep-seated hatred could exist between her and the aunt? As these questions raced through his mind, Anan suddenly thought of the uncle, who had been insistent on Xiaoxuan having an abortion. What was the reason behind this? Rushing to find his uncle, Anan discovered that the uncle had already dug up his father's grave, sewn his father's eyes shut, and wrapped the corpse in yellow cloth covered with talismans, preparing to bury it alongside a black dog. To ensure Pakun could never reincarnate, however, for the ritual to be completed, Pakun's exact time of death had to be written on the coffin. The villagers all said Pakun had died at 5 a.m., but the uncle's expression turned unnatural. Just as the shaman was about to write down the time, the uncle suddenly spoke.
Phải đâu? 3 rưỡi sáng. Kỳ vậy? Cuối cùng là giờ nào? 3 rưỡi sáng. Làm sao biết?
Just as Anan arrived and heard those words, he realized his father's death might not have been simple. He immediately confronted his uncle and learned that on the day his father drowned, his uncle and aunt were nearby, but neither of them helped him. Because they believed Pakun deserved to die, years ago, Pakun had repeatedly assaulted the uncle's wife. When the uncle found out and confronted him,
Không mổ chó cho tao á, thì mày với con đứa mới chỉ có cặp đất mà ăn. Biết điều á, thì im lặng. Còn nếu không á hả, cút mẹ chúng mày đi.
Pakun, arrogant and wealthy from owning the town's largest dog meat shop, showed no remorse. Despite being brothers, Pakun constantly oppressed the uncle, giving him no opportunities to succeed. He also frequently bullied the uncle's wife, even causing her to become pregnant. When Macy found out, she forced the uncle's wife to take a large dose of abortion pills, terminating the pregnancy. But the excessive dosage left her infertile for life. The uncle grew to hate Pakun deeply, so when he saw Pakun drowning, he felt it was divine justice and did nothing to save him. Anan had never known any of this. He believed his uncle was slandering his father and charged at him in anger. The uncle struck him on the head with a brick, knocking him unconscious, and Anan lay motionless on the ground, the villagers and shaman, horrified by the scene, fled, leaving the ritual unfinished. The uncle, fearing Pakun's ghost might come for revenge, rushed home to take his wife and escape, but saw the devil dog stirring a pot. Standing on the roof of their house, terrified and at a loss, the devil dog leapt toward him. But instead of attacking, it spit saliva onto his face, thinking he had escaped death. The uncle was relieved, but soon after, his face began to rot and deform, and he grew a dog's mouth and teeth. The aunt screamed in terror, scrambling onto the bed. But the uncle, now growling like a feral dog, grabbed her leg and dragged her violently to the kitchen. A pot of boiling water was on the stove. The uncle, under the devil dog's control, lifted the pot's lid and tried to dunk his wife into the boiling water. He eventually succeeded, forcing her into the scalding pot. When Anan arrived after hearing her screams, the aunt was already burned beyond recognition. At the same time, agonizing screams came from Macy's room. Anan rushed over to find the uncle holding a torch, burning Macy alive. If not for Shakshuan's desperate intervention, Macy would have been roasted like a dog. Anan tried to pull the uncle away, but the uncle slammed his head into the wall. Pinning Anan to the cutting board, the uncle prepared to chop off his hands. In that moment, Anan realized the devil dog wanted the entire family to experience the pain it had suffered from humans. Pakun used to drown dogs in water, so he drowned in the pond. The aunt and uncle butchered and boiled dogs, so one was scalded and the other transformed into a half-human, half-dog. Now, to survive, Anan had to kill his uncle in a fight for survival. Anan let go of all familial ties. The uncle began attacking Anan viciously, but Shakshuan rushed forward to help, handing Anan a metal basin, which he smashed over the uncle's head, breaking his neck. Seeing the uncle collapse, Anan hurriedly took his mother and Shakshuan to flee, but to their horror, the uncle stood back up, terrifying them all. Anan suddenly remembered Lai Ji's words. She had said that those possessed by the devil dog lose all humanity, become monsters, and can only be destroyed by lightning. Determined, Anan pushed his mother and Shakshuan out the door, choosing to face the uncle alone. The uncle grabbed a butcher knife and chased Anan into the woods. Ahead lay the cursed tree filled with dog souls, a place that attracted lightning. Anan ran desperately toward the tree. Just as he reached its base, the uncle charged like a rabid dog. Roaring and lunging at him, Anan dodged to the side, and the uncle slammed into a sharp branch, piercing his heart. Relieved, Anan thought it was over, but the uncle opened his eyes again. Resurrected in an eerie manner, Anan tackled him, pinning him to the tree, trapping him there. The devil dog within the uncle raged wildly, trying to absorb the tree's dark energy for a counterattack, but the surge of energy attracted a massive lightning strike, killing both the uncle and the devil dog instantly. Finally, the ordeal was over. Surviving the nightmare, Anan quickly closed the family's dog meat shop. Vowing never to sell dog meat again, he didn't want to risk more vengeance from the dogs. After dealing with everything, he took his mother and Shakshuan and left the place filled with sorrow. All right, that's all for today's story. See you in the next episode.